The train hissed to a stop with a groan of metal and dust, its whistle cutting through the quiet of the small prairie town like a knife. Clara May stepped onto the cracked wooden platform, her boots polished, gloves pale against her skirt, her hat quivering faintly in the wind. She clutched the letter with both hands, pressed flat against her chest like a prayer. Her corset was too tight. She hadn't eaten since Denver, but this was the moment her life might begin. She scanned the crowd. 3 ranch hands leaned on a post, chewing tobacco and staring. A few older women in faded dresses whispered behind fans. 2 barefoot children, sticky with dust, gaped at her white parasol like it was woven from starlight. And then she saw him, Henry Ward. He was broader than the photograph had suggested, with sharp eyes and a red neckerchief that seemed to choke him. He walked slowly, confidently, a smirk already playing on his lips. Clara stepped forward, lifted her chin, and said with a warm smile, "Mr. Ward, I'm Clara." He looked her up and down, the smirk fading. "This some kind of joke?" "No, sir. I came in response to your letter." "The advertisement." She opened the creased paper, hands trembling slightly. "Seeking a God-fearing woman of strong character for frontier marriage. Must be honest, gentle, and able to read." "That's me." "You look like you've never seen a day of hard work in your life." "That's not true," she whispered. "I cared for my mother for 5 years. Bathed her, fed her. What I need is a woman who knows cattle, not poetry." He spat on the ground near her shoe. "You ain't cut out for this place." Chuckles rippled through the crowd. Clara's cheeks burned. Henry turned to walk away. "I came all this way," she said, voice rising with the panic of abandonment. "I sold my belongings, left my family's grave behind. Please, just give me a chance." He paused only long enough to glance back and sneer. "Too good for your own good. That's the problem." Then he left. The platform was silent except for the wind and the slow ticking of the station's clock. Clara's hands dropped to her sides. The letter fluttered to the ground like a wounded dove. She bent to pick it up and froze, her vision blurring, knees weak. Someone giggled behind her, sharp and cruel. "City girls don't last long out here," came a woman's voice. A saloon dress brushed past. "Might as well head on back." "I have nowhere to go," Clara said, but the words were barely audible. She walked, not knowing where, her boots thudding against the platform, past the station master's window, past a child who offered her a piece of jerky with wide, uncertain eyes. She tried to thank him, but her throat tightened. Clara didn't cry until she reached the edge of the cattle yard. There, behind the troughs, hidden by stacked hay, she sat in the dirt and let it come, not loud, not messy, just a soft, shaking sound, like something breaking without splintering. She folded into herself, hands over her ears, as if to drown out the last echoes of laughter from the platform. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She'd done everything right, followed the instructions, prayed, listened, kept herself clean, decent, good. Too good, he'd said, as if decency were a fault to be punished. The prairie stretched before her, wide, pale, indifferent. The sun pressed down on her bonnet, baking her scalp. Her dress was too fine for this heat, her shoes pinched, but worse was the look in their eyes, not pity, not curiosity, but dismissal, like she was nothing. She remembered the last time she felt this way. Her father, after losing the farm, telling her, "You're no use to anyone unless you learn to be hard." Her mother, weeping into a handkerchief, saying, "Don't let this world make you cruel, Clara. That's how it wins." She hadn't let it, not then, not now. Still, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. In the distance, she heard a low whistle, not the train, maybe the breeze or a sound carried on the wind from somewhere deeper in the prairie. She wiped her eyes and forced herself up. If no one wanted her, she'd find work, or walk, or dig ditches, something. She'd survived worse. As she turned back toward town, she saw a Hema man standing by the water trough, not moving, just watching. He wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, a coat that had seen better years, and boots that looked handmade, stitched by a careful hand. Dust clung to him like a second skin. His face was quiet, not hard, not mocking, just still. He didn't speak. Clara blinked, then walked past him, heart hammering, waiting for the sneer, the insult, the dismissal. Nothing. Only silence. At the next block, her knees gave out, not dramatically, not with a cry, just a slow folding onto the shaded edge of a wooden porch. She tried to push herself up, couldn't. A door opened. The man was beside her now, crouched low. His voice was quiet, gentle as worn leather. "You hurt?" She shook her head. "Hungry?" A nod, barely. He helped her up without another word. His hands were strong, calloused. She didn't know his name. He didn't ask for hers. He simply opened the cabin door and let her inside. The room was cool, simply tin kettle on the stove, a single chair, a shelf of books, clean but lived in. He poured water into a cup and handed it to her. She drank slowly, then looked up. He stood near the window, watching the sun slide behind a low ridge. "I'm sorry to trouble you," she said. "You didn't. I don't mean to be a burden." "You ain't." She swallowed. "Do you always bring home strangers?" "No." Silence again. She looked around. No pictures, no trinkets, just a plain blanket folded on the cot. "Is this your home?" He nodded. "I'm Clara." He nodded again. Then, after a beat, "Samuel." She watched him. His hands were folded in front of him, one thumb rubbing the Authera habit, maybe from prayer, maybe from grief. "I should go," she said, though she didn't know where. Samuel turned to look at her fully. His eyes weren't cold, but they weren't soft either. They were searching. "There's stew on the stove," he said. "You're welcome to it." She hesitated, then sat back down. She hadn't had stew in weeks. As she ate, he moved to the porch, arms crossed. They didn't speak much that night, but something in her chest quieted, not healed, not forgiven, just quiet. And sometimes, quiet is all the soul needs to survive one more day. Out the window, the prairie darkened, and the man who hadn't laughed, hadn't judged, hadn't spoken more than a handful of words still stood watch, as if protecting something worth keeping, as if he'd seen it before anyone else had. Clara woke to the soft clink of a spoon against a metal cup. Pale light filtered through the curtain, if it could be called that, a torn quilt tacked to the frame. Outside, wind stirred something dry against the wall. The cot smelled faintly of cedar and wool, clean but worn. She sat up slowly, confused at first. Then it all came back: Henry's rejection, the heat, the walk, the porch, the man, Samuel. She swung her feet over the side of the cot and gasped. A basin of warm water sat on the floor beside her, with a folded cloth and a single bar of lye soap. Someone had thought of her comfort. No one had done that in a long time. She washed quietly. The water stung the raw spot on her heel where the shoe had bitten through skin. She winced, then smiled despite herself. That pain was real, but it was hers, not something handed down by a man with harsh eyes or careless hands. When she stepped into the small kitchen, he was already at the table. Samuel didn't look up right away. He poured black coffee into a cup and pushed it toward the second chair, then returned to eating bacon, bread, a single hard-boiled egg. Nothing fancy, but it smelled like heaven. "I can earn my keep," she said after a moment. "I sew, and I know how to read, and you need to eat," he replied without looking at her. His voice was rough but quiet, like it had worn itself down from disuse. She sat, unsure what to say. He finally glanced at her. "You slept near 12 hours. Thought you might need more." "I suppose I did." A pause stretched between them. Samuel wasn't what she'd expected from a rancher. He had the build, broad shoulders, thick forearms, but not the swagger. He simply ate, thoughtfully, like each bite had to earn its place. "You live here alone?" she asked. A nod. "How long?" 6 years. "Since your wife?" she guessed gently. His jaw tightened, just slightly, then a nod again. "I'm sorry. She had a name?" Clara blinked. "What was it?" "Anna." He stood abruptly, walked to the door, and opened it. Morning sun flooded the room. Fever took her. Left the place quiet. "I kept it that way." She followed him out, cup in hand, and stood beside him on the porch. The land rolled outward in low, golden hills, dotted with fence posts and brittle brush. A creek shimmered in the far distance, like a ribbon of silver. A hawk circled high above them. It was beautiful in the way only loneliness could be. Samuel spoke again, low and even. "You plan to stay?" Clara swallowed. "I don't have plans. Not anymore." He studied her face, not rudely, just long enough to see whether she meant it. "I could use help," he said. "It's planting season. With chores, too. If you stay, it'll be work." "I'm not afraid of work." His gaze didn't shift. "I don't mean laundry and soup. I mean hauling sacks, hammering rails, burying chickens when the fox gets greedy. I'll bury the fox if I have to. That surprised a chuckle out of him, barely audible, but there. All right then. She breathed out, a little unsure whether to smile or run. Later, as she scrubbed the porch with a stiff-bristled broom, she watched him mend the corral gate. Every motion was precise, not quick, but deliberate. He didn't waste a single nail or gesture. He caught her watching and didn't look away, just nodded once, like he'd expected her to be curious. "You from Boston?" he called. "No. Missouri. You don't sound like it. My mama taught me to speak like a lady, even if I never wore silk." "That right? Is it a problem?" He looked back down at the wood. "No. Just not what I figured when I saw you faint." She flushed. That was the sun. And hunger. I figured that, too. She stood, dusted her apron, and approached the fence slowly. "You don't say much, do you?" "I say what matters." "And what doesn't?" He paused before hammering the next nail. "Most things." She tilted her head. "Did you speak like that with Anna?" "No." "Why not?" "Because she never let me finish a sentence." Clara laughed light and sharp, like birdsong. Samuel didn't smile, but his eyes shifted, softened. That night, she cooked not much to work with, dried beans, root vegetables, a scrap of salted pork, but she made it taste like memory. Samuel took his second helping without a word, and that was how their rhythm began. He mended, she cleaned. He hauled water, she washed clothes and read aloud from his bookshelf in the evenings. They didn't speak of marriage or love or God, but they spoke of wood grain and storms and how the stars looked on cold nights. He never asked why Henry had rejected her. She never asked how long he'd grieved. They let the silence fill in the answers. But not everyone left them be. On the fifth day, riders came, two of them, men from town. One thin, with a hawk nose and yellow teeth. The other with the self-importance of someone whose belt buckle did most of the thinking. Samuel didn't rise from his porch chair. "Afternoon," the thin one called. Samuel nodded. "Got a concern brought up by the folks," he continued, tugging at his gloves. "This young woman, Clara May, she was promised to another man. Mail-order contract. She was rejected," Samuel said. "Maybe. But some folks think it's a matter of reputation." Samuel's eyes didn't change. "Whose? Yours? Hers? This town's. Don't want confusion, you understand." Samuel looked at Clara. She stood in the doorway, apron dusted with flour, hands trembling. He turned back to the men. "She's my wife." Clara's breath caught. The thin man blinked. "That's so. Married her the morning after she arrived. Got the papers. Don't need him to speak truth." The second man snorted. "Well, you're free to do what you want out here. Just don't bring trouble into town." They rode off. Samuel stood slowly, cracked his back, and looked at her. "I hope that was all right." Clara stared at him. "You told them I was your wife. Would have made it worse if I hadn't." She stepped closer. "Are you lying?" He met her gaze. "No. But we didn't. I don't need a preacher to tell me what I already decided." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "And what's that?" "That you deserve better than what this place gives women. And I don't need to be loud to stand by you." Clara didn't know what to say. 100 emotions tugged through her: fear, wonder, anger, something dangerously close to hope. "You don't even know me." "I know you stayed," he said. "That's more than most." She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned back into the house. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. That night, she sat on the porch while Samuel smoked a pipe in silence. Stars bloomed overhead. Coyotes howled in the far dark. He didn't look at her, but his voice came, quiet like an ember left in the ash. "I ain't ever going to raise my voice at you." She turned toward him. "And if you ever want to go, you don't owe me a thing." She swallowed. "And if I want to stay, you won't owe me then either." She smiled, slow and aching. The stars were very bright that night, and the silence between them was almost tender. The wind came sudden and strange, thick with dust and warning. It pulled at the curtains and rattled the shutters like an old enemy returned. Clara stood barefoot at the kitchen basin, sleeves rolled to her elbows, when the first crack of thunder broke across the horizon. She paused, hands dripping, and turned to the open door. Samuel was already outside, scanning the northern sky, his jaw set, hat pulled low. The storm crouched at the edge of the hills, purple and green, like a bruise about to swell. "Should I bring in the chickens?" she called. They won't make it in time. We need to board the windows. She ran. Together, they worked in silence boards, nails, hammer. The ranch had seen storms before, but this one moved differently. It growled low, like it knew them by name. Clara's hands shook as she braced the side window with a crooked plank, fingers catching on splinters. Samuel moved past her to fasten the front porch beam, his shirt clinging to him in the thickening heat. Lightning forked in the distance as they ducked inside. The first wall of rain struck the cabin with a force that made the walls creak. Samuel latched the door. The room dimmed to a flickering candle and the low howl of wind through chinks in the wall. Clara pressed her hands to her skirts, trying to steady herself. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, though she wasn't sure. They sat across from each other at the table, the storm shaking the rafters like a preacher pounding truth into unwilling hearts. Her voice came quiet. "I used to love storms when I was little. I'd crawl into my mama's bed and count the thunder." Said each crack was heaven clapping. Samuel didn't smile, but he didn't look away either. "I haven't liked them since she died." He reached for the kettle and poured them each a cup of hot water steeped with pine needles. The scent filled the room sharp, clean, grounding. "You know what I thought when I saw you at the station?" she asked, voice soft over the storm. "You waited. I thought, here's a man who's either terribly lonely or terribly dangerous. And now," she looked down into her cup, "now I think you're both." "You're not wrong." They listened as the wind screamed. Something outside thudded hard against the wall. Clara flinched. Samuel rose and moved to the door, but she stood too. "I'll go," he said. "Stay here." "I'm not afraid," she whispered. "I know," he replied. "But I am." She didn't understand until he stepped out into the downpour. She waited, counting breaths, staring at the flickering candle. Then a voice cut through the wind, not Samuel's. A man, coughing, shouting. She ran to the door and yanked it open. Samuel was standing under the overhang, drenched, rifle in one hand. At his feet, slumped in the mud, was a Mano hat, shirt torn, blood on his temple. Clara rushed forward. "Who is he?" she asked. "Don't know," Samuel said. Found him stumbling toward the barn. The stranger groaned. He was younger than Samuel, maybe 30, with a trimmed mustache and the look of someone used to being obeyed. He smelled of bourbon and something fouler. She knelt beside him. His lips were cracked, a bruise blooming over his left eye. "Get him inside," she said. "He'll die out here." Samuel hesitated, then nodded once. Together, they dragged the man in and laid him on a straw pallet near the stove. Clara brought cloth and boiled water. Samuel leaned in the corner, watching. "He needs a doctor," she said. "We don't have one. Closest is 2 towns over. Then it's me or nothing." The stranger stirred. His eyes opened, wild with pain, then landed on Clara. He smiled, crooked. "An angel," he slurred. "Or hell's mercy." "Be quiet." "Wasn't talking to you," he muttered, looking at Samuel. Samuel moved closer. "Easy," Clara warned. "You don't need to scare him." Samuel crossed his arms. "I don't need to like him either." They sat up through the night as the storm raged on. The man dozed in and out, sometimes muttering names: Mara, Birch, money, bullets. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving behind a land soaked to the bone and a sky washed clean. Samuel stood on the porch, watching the sunrise. Clara came to him, a blanket draped around her shoulders. Her eyes were red. She hadn't slept. "Who do you think he is?" she asked. "Trouble," Samuel said flatly. "You always think that." He didn't answer. Inside, the man groaned again. Samuel didn't move. "What are you afraid of?" she asked softly. Samuel's voice was hard now. "I built this place to be quiet. To be still. That man brings noise." Clara turned to him. "So did I. That was different." "How?" "Because you didn't bring a gunshot wound and a debt behind your eyes." She stepped forward. "You don't know that. You never asked." He looked at her, finally, and something in him cracked. "I know what it's like to take in someone you can't trust," he said. "Anna's cousin came once. Needed help. Said he was chased. We let him stay. 3 days later, my wife was dead, and the barn was ash." Clara's breath caught. He nodded. He owed men. They came to collect. "I'm not her," she whispered. "I know." They stood in silence as the stranger groaned behind them. Later that day, Samuel saddled the horse and rode to town for supplies. He didn't say why. He just left. Clara sat with the man. He was clearer now, spoke slower. Introduced himself as Tom Reed. Said he'd been ambushed on the trail. Claimed he used to be a lawman or something close. He smiled when she asked where he was headed. Wherever a man's name don't matter. She didn't press further, but when Samuel returned that night, his face was grim. I asked around, he told her. Tom's wanted. For what? Desertion. Theft. Maybe worse. Tom coughed from the cot. That depends on who you ask. Samuel raised the rifle. You step out of this house come morning, you won't come back. Clara stood between them. He's still healing. Then he'll heal on his own time. Samuel didn't speak to her that night. The fire burned low. Clara sat alone on the porch, staring out at the fence line, moonlight turning the wet grass silver. Samuel stepped out eventually, handed her a cup of water. Didn't mean to frighten you, he said. You didn't. She looked up at him. You think I'm too soft. I think you see people clearer than they deserve. Isn't that what faith is? He didn't answer. She placed her hand on his. It was a small touch, but steady. I'm not leaving, she said, even if you don't agree with me. His fingers closed slowly around hers. They stayed like that, silent, close, until the coyotes howled again, and somewhere inside, the stranger dreamed of gunfire. Tom was gone by morning, not with gratitude, not with shame, just a slow shuffle into the horizon with a borrowed hat and a half loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. Samuel didn't watch him leave. Clara did. She stood by the fence as the sun cracked the ridge, arms folded tight against the breeze. Tom had looked back once, just once, and tipped his head in something like apology, but there had been no words, only dust rising behind his boots. She returned to the house and found Samuel fixing the door hinge, his hands steady, his jaw tight. You didn't even say goodbye, she said. He didn't earn it. Clara sighed. You're not a cruel man. No, he said, rising slowly. But I've learned not to feed what bites. She opened her mouth, closed it, turned back toward the kitchen, then froze at the sound of hoofbeats. Samuel heard it too. They stepped onto the porch just as three riders crested the path, one lean and upright, one round as a barrel, and the third with a rifle across his lap. Clara knew immediately something was wrong. The lead rider, face sunburned and eyes sharp, reined in and spat. That fella you took in, Tom Reed. Samuel didn't move. He left this morning. You sure? You see him here. The man chuckled, mean and joyless. He stole something from our boss. We were told to fetch it. Him, if we can. Bodies, if we must. Clara stepped forward. He's long gone. Sick and limping. Then we'll take a look inside, just to be sure. Samuel's hand slid to his hip, near the revolver he hadn't drawn in years. You won't be crossing that threshold. The third man, younger and nervous, shifted in his saddle. Ain't worth dying for, sir. Clara felt her heart drum against her ribs. Her voice came low, even. We offered him water. That's all. The round man spoke now. Water's worth a lot these days. Samuel took a step forward. Turn your horses, he said. Ain't nothing here for you but dry land and trouble. The leader laughed. You think we're scared of one quiet rancher? Samuel didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence around him was louder than any threat. And Clara felt something rise in her chest, not fear, not even pride, but certainty. She stepped beside him and said, with a voice steadier than it had ever been in her life, You'd best go now. Because this land belongs to a man who's already buried what he's loved, and I don't think he'd mind adding more. That gave them Poussey Long one. The youngest rider shifted again. Boss said nothing about shooting no woman. The leader hissed through his teeth. You two best watch your backs. Folks like you get burned down in places like this. Samuel raised the gun, not aimed, just held. I'll remember that, he said. They left, eventually, but they didn't look back. That night, Clara sat on the edge of the porch while Samuel cleaned the rifle. He didn't speak. She didn't ask him to. The stars were dim, clouded, restless. The prairie was too quiet. We should leave, she said. Samuel paused. This is my land. They'll come back. I know. We can't shoot our way through life. He looked at her, his face unreadable. I don't run, he said. Clara nodded. Then I'll stay. He stood, wiped his hands on a cloth, and joined her at the edge of the porch. You're not what I expected, he said. And you're more than I was ever promised. They sat side by side until the chill crept under their skin and into their bones. At dawn, Samuel hitched the wagon not to leave, but to ride into town. "I won't be silent anymore," he said. Clara packed the bread, a folded note in case he didn't come back. He kissed her forehead, just once, then rode off through the fog. By mid-morning, Clara stood alone on the porch. She didn't wring her hands, didn't pace, she just waited. The town was louder than she remembered, buzzing with fear and gossip. The men who'd threatened them were known by name, and not fondly. Samuel rode straight to the sheriff's office and dismounted without a word. The sheriff stepped out slowly, eyes narrowed. "You come to cause trouble?" "I came to finish it." Samuel pulled the rifle from his back and laid it on the ground. "I'm not here to threaten," he said, "but I won't be hunted either. I took in a wounded man, fed him, let him go. If others want to bring their lawless grudges here, they'll have to come through me. And I won't be alone." He turned to the gathering crowd. "She stands beside me, a woman your town laughed at, called too good for your whiskey-soaked boots. She's better than most of you. And if she chooses to plant roots on my land, you'll respect that or answer for it." The sheriff said nothing, but an old woman near the general store gave a slow nod. A stable boy clapped once. Samuel turned and rode home before anyone found words to stop him. Clara saw him coming from half a mile out. She didn't smile, just stood taller. He dismounted, handed her a wrapped parcel. "Town gave us sugar." She blinked. "That's a start. They'll leave us be now." "Because of the rifle?" "Because of you." She took his hand. "I used to think kindness was something small," she said. "A polite word, a gentle hand. But it's not. It's armor. And I used to think silence was safety. And now I know it's only worth something when it protects what's right." The sun dipped low behind them, burning the prairie gold. A breeze carried the scent of smoke from a neighbor's field, but it didn't smell like danger. It smelled like something being cleared for planting. As they stepped into the house, Samuel paused. "I never did ask," he said. "Back when you first showed up, what did you want when you came here?" She looked around the little cabin, worn floors, patched curtains, cracked stove, and smiled. "Somewhere to be good and not be punished for it." He nodded. "Then I hope I'm enough." "You are," she said. "But you were never the one who had to prove it." They shared a meal as dusk settled around them. No threats, no ghosts, just two people learning the shape of safety again. And when the stars came back, they came quietly, as if to say, "We're watching, and we approve."